True war encounters, Audie Murphy. The measured fire. The cellar stinks of wet stone and burnt powder. Audie Murphy crouches behind a collapsed wine rack, the M1911 in his right hand, still warm from the last shot. Above him, boots scrape across broken floor tiles. German voices, close, maybe 10 feet away, bark orders through the smoke. His breath comes in shallow pulls. The pistol has 3 rounds left, maybe 4. He lost count 2 minutes ago when the grenade went off in the courtyard. It's late October 1943, somewhere south of Volturno in central Italy. The farmhouse was supposed to be clear. The platoon had swept it an hour before dawn, moved up the ridge, and left Murphy with 2 riflemen, Kowalski and Reed, to hold the crossroads until the supply trucks caught up. Then the Germans came back, slipping through the olive groves under morning fog that turned the world grey and close. Murphy's 2 men are dead in the courtyard now. He's alone in the cellar with a service pistol, a few grenades he can't risk using this close, and no way out except the stairs the enemy is coming down. The 3rd Infantry Division had been pushing north through broken terrain for weeks, chasing a Wehrmacht that kept turning to bite. Every farmhouse, every stone bridge, every tree line became a potential ambush. Murphy's squad had been on the line for 19 days straight. They were supposed to rotate back, but casualties near Mignano changed everything. So when Lieutenant Hendricks ordered Murphy to secure the crossroads with a skeleton crew, nobody complained. It was routine, guard duty, a chance to sleep. Murphy hears the first boot hit the top stair. He shifts his weight, keeps the pistol low, watches the slice of grey light from the doorway. His hands are steady, but his mind is counting. 3 rounds, maybe 4. If he empties the magazine in panic, he's done. If he misses even once, they'll rush him. The M1911 kicks hard. At this range, in this light, every shot has to matter. He exhales slowly, remembering what his drill sergeant said back in Texas. A pistol's not for spraying, it's for deciding. That voice feels impossibly distant now, drowned out by the thud of boots on wood, the scrape of a rifle barrel against the doorframe. Murphy tightens his grip. The first German appears, Feldgrau uniform, coal scuttle helmet, MP40 slung low. Murphy fires once. The man drops without a sound. The second soldier freezes at the top of the stairs, shouts something, pulls back. Murphy doesn't chase the shot. He waits. The arithmetic is simple and brutal. 3 bullets, maybe more Germans than that. Every trigger pull is a commitment. Every miss is the end. Above him, angry voices confer. Murphy listens to his own heartbeat, counts seconds. The Germans know he's down here. They know he's alone. But they don't know how many rounds he has left. They don't know if there's another gun, another man, another grenade. That uncertainty is the only card Murphy holds in central Italy's muddy chess game, and he's betting his life on it. If stories like this make you imagine what you'd do under fire, tell us in the comments how you think you'd react in this situation, and stay with us for the next chapters. 6 hours earlier, the morning had been almost quiet. Murphy, Kowalski and Reed had sat against the farmhouse wall, sharing a can of cold hash and watching mist drift through the olive groves south of Volturno. The roads were mud. The sky was the color of dirty wool, and nobody believed the war would end before winter. Reed kept checking his watch like it might speed up time. Kowalski made jokes about Italian wine cellars and what they might find. Lieutenant Hendricks had arrived in a jeep, maps tucked under his arm, face showing the strain of too many days without sleep. The briefing was simple. Hold the crossroads, guide the supply convoy through when it arrived around noon, then rejoin the company on the ridge. Simple, routine, the kind of order that gets filed under minor details in after-action reports. "You'll be fine here," Hendricks had said, scanning the fog-choked terrain. "The Krauts are falling back. This sector's quiet." Murphy had nodded, but something in his gut said otherwise. He'd learned in central Italy's broken terrain that quiet was a word officers used when they didn't have enough intelligence. The 3rd Infantry Division was stretched thin, pushing too fast with too few reserves. Quiet didn't mean safe, it just meant nobody had died yet. Kowalski set up watch on the second floor. Reed took the road approach. Murphy checked the perimeter, noted the stone walls, the tree line 200 yards out, the way the fog made everything feel closer than it was. He found the cellar entrance, old wooden stairs, wine racks, probably a family's pride before the war turned their home into a military grid reference. He thought about the M1911 on his hip. 7 rounds in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. 8 chances to make a decision. He'd qualified as an expert with the pistol back at Camp Walters, but that was target shooting on a sunny Texas afternoon. Combat was different. Combat was trigger pull under pressure, vision narrowed by adrenaline, the knowledge that every bullet you didn't have might be the one you needed. The Germans came back at 08:20 hours, moving through the olive groves like ghosts materializing from fog. Reed saw them first, shouted a warning, fired twice with his M1 Garand, then went silent. Kowalski's Thompson chattered from the upper window, stopped abruptly. Murphy was moving toward the stairs when the grenade came through the doorway and turned the world into thunder and flying stone. When his ears stopped ringing, Kowalski and Reed weren't answering. Murphy could hear German voices outside, coordinating, moving closer. He made the calculation in 2 seconds. The courtyard was death. The upper floor was compromised. The cellar was the only position he could defend alone. He moved fast, descending into the cool darkness, positioning himself behind the wine racks with a clear view of the stairs. Now, minutes later, listening to boots above him and counting bullets like a miser counting coins, Murphy understands what Lieutenant Hendricks couldn't have known, that holding a position isn't about orders or maps. It's about the cold weight of a pistol in your hand and the arithmetic of survival measured 1 shot at a time. The stairwell fills with the rattle of a submachine gun, blind suppressing fire, rounds punching through plaster and old wood. Murphy presses himself into the corner, feels chips of stone sting his neck. The shooting stops. A second German rushes the stairs, boots pounding, trying to use the covering fire to close the distance. Murphy shifts, finds the angle, fires twice. The soldier stumbles, crashes into the wall, slides down. 2 rounds left. Maybe 1. Murphy's throat is dry. His hands are shaking now, not from fear exactly, but from the crushing weight of deciding. Back in the olive groves south of Volturno, during training exercises with the 3rd Infantry Division, sergeants talked about fire discipline like it was a checkbox on a form. Nobody mentioned what it felt like when each trigger pull was a choice between survival and surrender, when the arithmetic of ammunition became the difference between walking out or being carried. He hears voices above, something being dragged. They're pulling back their wounded, reassessing. Murphy uses the pause to crawl to the base of the stairs, retrieve the MP40 from the dead soldier. The weapon feels foreign, heavier than the M1, the balance all wrong, but it's firepower. He checks the magazine, half full, sets it beside him, keeps the M1911 ready. The pistol is almost empty, but it's his. The weight familiar, the trigger pull predictable, measured fire, 1 bullet, 1 decision. Minutes pass like hours. Murphy thinks about Kowalski's jokes, Reed's nervous watch-checking, Lieutenant Hendricks driving away in that jeep with maps that showed this position as a blue dot labeled secure. He thinks about the difference between what gets written in after-action reports and what actually happens in cellars in central Italy, where fog turns friends into memory and strangers into threats 6 feet away. A corporal from another company once told Murphy a story about Kasserine Pass, about Americans learning the hard way that doctrine doesn't survive contact with reality. The manual says one thing, the corporal had said, but the ground says another. You listen to the ground, you might live. You follow the book, you die neat and proper with all the right forms filled out. Murphy hears it then. The soft metallic click of a grenade pin being pulled. He has maybe 3 seconds. He fires the last round from the M1911 blind up the stairwell, not to hit but to make them hesitate. Grabs the MP40, rolls hard to the left just as the grenade tumbles down and detonates. Flash, heat, noise that turns the air to hammers. Dust and smoke fill the cellar like a living thing. When his ears stop ringing, Murphy's jaw is bleeding from a stone fragment. The stairwell is half collapsed. Above him, silence, then retreating boots, German voices fading into the olive groves. They think he's dead, or they've decided he's not worth the cost. Either way, they're gone. Murphy sits in the dark with the empty M1911 in his hand. The pistol is light now, useless, but he can't put it down. His finger rests on the trigger guard, pressing against metal that's still warm. 7 rounds in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. 8 decisions made in smoke and fear. 8 times he chose to stay, to measure, to fire only when the shot mattered. The manual called it fire discipline. Murphy calls it something else, something he doesn't have words for yet, something that will wake him up in the middle of the night for decades. Would you follow the orders exactly, or trust what your own eyes and instincts tell you in a moment like this? Comment which path you'd take, and share this episode with someone who loves real human stories from history. The supply convoy doesn't arrive at noon. It doesn't arrive at all. By the time Murphy climbs out of the cellar, the sun is a pale disk behind thinning fog, and the crossroads south of Volturno is littered with spent brass and broken stone. Kowalski lies in the courtyard with his Thompson beside him, face turned toward the sky. Reed is near the road, one hand still reaching toward his rifle. Murphy checks for pulses he knows he won't find, then does what the 3rd Infantry Division taught him. He collects dog tags, marks positions in his mind for the Graves registration teams, and prepares to report. Lieutenant Hendricks arrives 3 hours later with the company, faces showing the exhaustion of men who've been fighting since dawn on a different ridge. The lieutenant takes one look at the farmhouse, the bodies, the shattered stairwell, and his expression goes carefully neutral. The look officers wear when they're calculating how to write up something that shouldn't have happened. "You held the position," Hendricks says. "It's not quite a question." "Yes, sir," Murphy answers. "Alone?" "After the first contact, yes, sir." Hendricks walks the perimeter, counting German bodies, examining angles of fire. A sergeant from weapons platoon finds the MP40 in the cellar, the empty M1911 magazines. Later, someone will piece together what happened from blood patterns and bullet holes, from the spacing of spent casings on cellar floor. Later, it will become a story passed along in tents and foxholes across central Italy's broken terrain. The kid who held a farmhouse with a pistol and counted shots like a banker counting pennies. But right now, standing in afternoon light that makes the olive groves look almost peaceful, nobody says anything. The men dig shallow graves for Kowalski and Reed, mark them with inverted rifles and helmets. Murphy stands apart, the empty M1911 holstered on his hip, feeling the weight of absence where bullets used to be. A private named DeMarco, new to the company, watches Murphy with something between awe and fear. Later, when they're back on the ridge preparing to move north, DeMarco approaches carefully. "They're saying you took out 6 Krauts with a 45 and some captured German iron," DeMarco says. "That true?" Murphy looks at him, remembers the cellar's darkness, the arithmetic of 3 bullets, maybe 4, the sound of boots on stairs and his own heart hammering. Remembers the moment between deciding to fire and actually pulling the trigger, that eternal half-second where measured fire becomes the difference between mathematics and dying. "I held the position," Murphy says finally. "That's all." "But how did you—" "I counted," Murphy says quietly. "Every round, every angle. I counted and I didn't waste. DeMarco wants more. They always want more. Details to turn into stories, clarity to replace the fog of what combat actually feels like. But Murphy doesn't have more to give. What happened in that cellar isn't a story yet. It's still too close, too raw, too weighted with the knowledge that Kowalski and Reed counted on him, and he counted bullets instead of friends. That night, Lieutenant Hendricks writes the after-action report. Murphy sees it later, typed neat on onion skin paper. Pantos fern pat. Murphy successfully defended assigned position against superior enemy force, demonstrating exceptional fire discipline and tactical awareness under extreme pressure. 53 words to describe fog and fear and the cold arithmetic of staying alive. 53 words that mention weapons and positions, but say nothing about the way Murphy's hands shook afterward, the way he kept reaching for the M1911 to check if it was loaded, even though he knew it was empty. The 3rd Infantry Division moves north. The war continues. And somewhere in the machinery that turns combat into citations, someone decides Murphy's defense of a nameless farmhouse south of Volturno doesn't quite meet the criteria for official recognition. It gets filed, forgotten, absorbed into the larger narrative of armies advancing through central Italy's mud and stone. But the men remember. They remember the kid who counted shots in the dark and made everyone matter. The secret nobody writes in after-action reports. Audie Murphy nearly broke. It happened in the cellar, between the 2nd and 3rd German coming down those stairs. Murphy's hands were on the M1911, 1 round left. Or was it 2? And for maybe 5 seconds he couldn't remember. The count had slipped. The arithmetic that kept him alive suddenly felt like numbers written in fog. And the fear that crashed through him wasn't fear of dying, but fear of not knowing, of having miscounted, of pulling the trigger on an empty chamber when the next man rushed him. In that moment, pressed against cold stone in a farmhouse south of Volturno, Murphy almost ran, almost dropped everything and bolted for the courtyard where Kowalski and Reed lay in morning light. The urge was physical, legs tensed, breath caught, every muscle screaming, move, run, survive. But he didn't. He stayed. Not because he was brave, but because running meant abandoning the position, and abandoning the position meant Kowalski and Reed died for nothing. So he forced himself to count again, traced back through the firefight shot by shot. 1st German at the top of stairs, 1 round. 2nd rush, 2 soldiers, 2 rounds, maybe 3, if the first shot missed. Magazine holds 7. 1 in the chamber makes 8. First contact in the courtyard he'd fired twice. That left 6, no 5. The math fought him, slipped like wet stone, but he held onto it because it was all he had. That's what measured fire really means, not just counting bullets, but holding on to sanity through arithmetic, when every instinct says panic and spray and pray. The 3rd Infantry Division trains you to conserve ammunition, to make shots count. Nobody trains you for the moment when you lose track and have to reconstruct reality 1 bullet at a time, while boots thunder overhead and your friends cool in the courtyard. Private DeMarco never learns this part. Lieutenant Hendricks never puts it in the report. Years later, when Murphy is famous and journalists ask about combat, he'll talk about duty and training and the men beside him. He won't mention the 5 seconds in an Italian cellar when he couldn't remember if his pistol had 1 round or none, when the difference between those numbers was the difference between measured fire and suicide. Sergeant Waller from Headquarters Company finds Murphy that evening, sitting apart from the others, cleaning the M1911 for the 3rd time. The pistol is spotless, barrel bright, action smooth, magazine seated proper. Murphy keeps working anyway, hands moving through motions that require no thought. Hendricks says you held solo for almost an hour, Waller says quietly. Murphy doesn't look up. Felt longer. I bet it did. Waller sits, lights 2 cigarettes, hands 1 to Murphy. They smoke in silence, watching fog settle over the olive groves, where tomorrow someone else will fight and someone else will count bullets in the dark. You know what gets me? Waller says finally. It's not the guys who go down fighting. It's the ones who come back and can't talk about it. The ones who did something impossible and all they can say is, I held the position. Murphy draws on the cigarette, tastes tobacco and cordite that won't wash out of his throat. What else is there to say? I don't know, Waller admits. But I see you checking that pistol like maybe you're afraid it lied to you. Murphy's hands stop moving. The M1911 sits in his lap, familiar and alien. 8 rounds it held, 8 decisions, and one moment when he lost count and nearly lost everything. It didn't lie, Murphy says quietly. I did. Told myself I was counting when really I was guessing. Told myself I was brave when really I was just too scared to run. You held, Waller says. That's what matters. But Murphy knows different. In central Italy's gathering dark, surrounded by men who think he's fearless, he carries the knowledge that measured fire isn't about courage. It's about staying functional when terror wants to shut you down. It's about checking and rechecking and forcing your mind to work when it wants to scream. The war will give Murphy more moments like this, bigger battles, official recognition, a Medal of Honor for something he does on a burning tank destroyer in France. But this cellar south of Volturno, this farmhouse nobody remembers, this is the one that teaches him the truth. Heroism isn't what you do, it's what you keep doing after you realize you're breaking. The 3rd Infantry Division pushes deeper into central Italy, then France, then Germany. The war grinds forward, consuming men and places and turning them into lines on maps and numbers in casualty reports. The farmhouse south of Volturno becomes a grid reference, then a footnote, then nothing. Just one more position briefly held and quietly abandoned in the long march north. Audie Murphy receives his Medal of Honor 13 months later for different heroism, different arithmetic. A burning tank destroyer near Holzwihr, enemy infantry closing, Murphy climbing onto the deck and using the .50 caliber to turn mathematics into survival. The journalists love that story. The photos show a slight young man in uniform looking uncomfortable with glory. What they don't show is how, standing on that tank destroyer, Murphy's mind went back to an Italian cellar and the moment he lost count. He'll carry both battles forward into a post-war life neither prepared him for. Hollywood movies, nightmares that wake him sweating, reaching for weapons that aren't there, quiet moments when the smell of diesel or cordite brings everything back with a clarity that makes the present feel like a dream. 20 years after Volturno, a researcher from the Army Historical Division contacts Murphy about his combat record. They're trying to document lesser-known actions, fill gaps in the official narrative. Someone found Lieutenant Hendrix's after-action report, noticed the discrepancy between German casualties and ammunition expended, wondered if there was a story worth recording. Murphy sits in his California home, the M1911 he kept, after the war locked in a drawer he rarely opens. He thinks about what to tell this researcher, what words could capture fog and fear and the weight of counting bullets in the dark. How do you explain that the action the army forgot taught him more about fear and responsibility than the one they gave him a medal for? It was just a position that needed holding, Murphy says finally. I did what anyone would have done. The researcher presses for details. Murphy gives dates, terrain, unit designation. He describes the crossroads, the olive groves, the tactical situation. What he doesn't describe, the 5 seconds he lost count, the moment he nearly ran, the way Kowalski's watch kept ticking in the courtyard while Murphy counted bullets like rosary beads and prayed for math to save him. Some truths are too small for history, too private for legends. They live only in the men who carried them, in quiet moments when memory rises unbidden and the past feels more real than whatever room you're sitting in. Murphy dies in 1971, the most decorated American soldier of World War II. His obituaries list every medal, every citation, every official recognition of valor. They mention the tank destroyer at Holzwihr. They don't mention a farmhouse south of Volturno, where a young soldier learned that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the discipline to keep counting when every instinct screams to stop. But somewhere in the archives, Hendrix's after-action report still exists, 53 words about fire discipline and tactical awareness. 53 words that say everything and nothing about what it costs to hold that position, to measure each shot, to carry the knowledge that mathematics can save you only if you have the courage to keep counting when the numbers blur. And in bedrooms across America, old men who served in central Italy sometimes wake at night with the smell of cordite in their nostrils and the weight of empty weapons in their hands. They remember counting. They remember the terrible arithmetic of staying alive. They remember that the legends people tell are lighter than air, while the memories settle in your bones and never quite let go. The fog over the olive grove south of Volturno has long since lifted, but for those who were there, for those who learned what measured fire really means, the fog never entirely clears. It just becomes part of the landscape, part of the weight you carry forward, into whatever peace looks like after you've counted bullets in the dark and found that each one matters more than your own life. If this story reminded you that behind every medal there's a human being carrying memories we'll never fully see, subscribe to the channel, tell us which country you watch from, and invite someone to revisit history with us in the next story.